All right, we are diving deep into ancient Greece today to witness a major showdown. On one side, you've got the sharpest minds in the world, people who were absolutely convinced that pure logic could solve any puzzle the universe threw at them. And on the other, a group from this tiny town with a completely different take on what it means to be truly noble. This is all about two very different ways of searching for truth. So let's start with a big question, one that people have been asking forever. What actually makes a person noble? Is it about being powerful, or rich, or having a mind that's sharper than everyone else's? The world has always had its own answers, but we're about to look at a perspective that just flips that whole idea on its head. Okay, so this lays out the conflict perfectly. Over on the left, you have the world's definition of status, right? Intellect, power, wealth, the stuff you can see. But on the right, we have this thing called spiritual nobility. And it's not about anything on the outside. It's all about your inner posture, humility, eagerness, diligence. And that tension right there, that's what we're going to unpack. So let's set the scene. We're going back to the 1st century, to the very heart of the Greek intellectual world, Athens. This was a city that truly believed it was sitting right at the absolute peak of human reason. What you're looking at here is the Areopagus, or Mars Hill. This place was the intellectual heartbeat of Athens. I mean, this was the ultimate stage. If you had a new idea, a new philosophy, you brought it here to get picked apart by the smartest people of the day. They had this unshakable faith that pure human logic was the master key that could unlock any secret of the universe. Now, the philosophers here were, well, they were brilliant, no question about it. But they were also overflowing with cultural self-confidence and intellectual pride. They lived to argue and debate, always looking for the latest thing, not so much for truth, but just for the novelty of it. Their entire worldview was built on one single foundation. Human reason is the final judge of everything, period. But while the Athenians were all wrapped up in their debates, just a short journey away, in a much quieter town called Berea, a completely different way of thinking was taking root. And this is where we find what our story calls a more noble way to look for truth. This quote just nails the paradox of Athens, doesn't it? The very thing that made them great, their incredible intellect, had actually become their biggest problem. It built this massive wall of pride around them, a wall that made it impossible for them to even consider a truth that didn't fit neatly inside their own logical boxes. And here you can see the two methods right next to each other. I mean, it is night and day. Look at the goals. The Athenians, they wanted to win debates. The Bereans, they just wanted to find the truth. The attitude in Athens was intellectual pride. In Berea, it was eager humility. One side argues, the other receives, and then verifies. That difference in approach, it changes everything. And that's why the Bereans were called more noble. It had nothing to do with their IQ or their social standing. It was all about this spiritual nobility. Think of it like an internal compass that was just constantly pointed toward finding divine truth, even if that truth completely upended what they thought they knew. So you've got these two totally opposite worldviews. What do you think happens when they finally collide? Well, we're about to find out, because the Apostle Paul himself is rolling into Athens, and he's about to step onto the stage at the Areopagus. You really have to picture this scene. You have the masters of logic, the intellectual heavyweights of the entire ancient world, all gathered to listen to this one guy. This wasn't just some friendly discussion. No, this was a fundamental clash between two different realities, the limits of human reason versus the claims of divine revelation. Paul's opening move here is just brilliant. He doesn't come in swinging, attacking their beliefs. No, instead he finds some common ground. He points to something they built themselves, an altar dedicated to an unknown God. He uses their own admission that there's a gap in their knowledge as his starting point. He's basically saying, hey, you know that thing you admit you don't understand? Let's talk about that. And here's the core of his whole strategy. Paul knows he can't beat the Greeks at their own game of pure logic, so he doesn't even try. Instead, he just reframes the entire conversation. He introduces a brand new cosmology, a totally different understanding of the universe, of God, and where humans fit into it all, and it suddenly makes all their philosophies look really, really small. And then he just dismantles their worldview, piece by piece. He starts with their unknown God and introduces a single, all-powerful creator. He makes their thousands of temples irrelevant by saying God is way too big to live in a building. He makes their whole sacrificial system pointless by saying God doesn't need anything from us. every point just systematically pulls a foundational block out from under their philosophy, leading to this radical call to just rethink everything. So, what was the result of all this? How did these two very different approaches pan out? Well, the outcomes in Athens and Berea tell the whole story, and they give us our biggest takeaway. I mean, the results really do speak for themselves. In Athens, the city of intellectual giants, the message was mostly met with mockery. A few people believed, sure, but most just laughed. But in Berea, where the people were humble and just wanted the truth, there was widespread belief. The message was the same, but the mindset of the audience made all the difference. And that brings us right back to our main idea, this spiritual compass. Because in this story, real nobility, true nobility, isn't about how smart you are or how much you know. It's an internal thing. It's having the humility and the eagerness to search for divine truth, and valuing that search way more than the need to be right or to win an argument. Which really leaves all of us with a final question to think about. When you're faced with a new idea, especially one that challenges what you believe, is your mind a bridge, open and willing to explore? Or does it become a wall, built out of pride, that just blocks the way?